Welcome to Big Blend Radio's Pet Connection podcast, where every third Wednesday we celebrate our furry, feathery, and scaly friends. Welcome, everyone. Today on the Pet Connection, we're going to be talking about what we can do to help animals and pets affected by Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton out in Florida. So we're looking at the southeast states. We've got Georgia, South Carolina, Florida, the Big Bend region of Florida, East Tennessee, and of course, Western North Carolina. So a lot of places affected. And in these kind of devastating times, like a tornado and things like that, sometimes you are not able to actually even rescue yourselves. Look at the death toll of these hurricanes, which is completely depressing. But sometimes your animals end up somewhere else. It just is the nature of the beast. And what we're going to focus on are the different organizations working really hard to rescue these animals, these pets, and also help them medically and to get them homes. And so there's so many amazing organizations out there. And as Angela Laws here from Trusted House Sitters always says, it's a big network, isn't it, Angela? Welcome back. How are you?
Hi, Lisa. I'm fine, thank you. And I'm glad to hear that you and Nancy are safe. And the amazing work and messaging that you get out there. Do you know what? I am never going to sort of complain about a bit of rain in the UK. Not going to ever do that again. I say I won't, but I'm sure I will. But what you've gone through out there and what's been happening is devastating. And our hearts go out to everybody who's been affected. But, you know, big, huge thanks to all the emergency services and the first responders. And of course, we're talking pets. So to those organizations, those shelters, those national organizations, the relief workers who are helping the pets as well, because they are family. And to those who've been affected, they're being affected, their families, whether they've got a fur coat on or whether they've got 2 legs or 4 legs, it's your family and you feel for it. So yeah, I mean, there's some amazing work being done. And today we talk about how we can help. And it is also October, and October is National Adopt a Shelter Dog Month. And so that is another thing that we can talk about, another way that you can help if you're not in those regions. But yeah, let's talk about how we can help and some of the tips or information that we can give. But also we want to hear from those who are listening to us and those who are being affected. You know, what have you found that helps? What would you, how can we help you help your communities and what's going on?
Yeah, it's a really important thing because we want to know that, you're helping the right place. And we did, as soon as, Hurricane Helene happened, we turned around by the end of the next week. Was it the end of, I think we turned it around pretty fast. Actually, I can't even think. With our friends, Steve and Karen Wilson, who were on the first show, The Pet Connection, who owned the Lion and the Rose Bed and Breakfast. They were on also with, their local Humane Society in Asheville, North Carolina on our first episode for The Pet Connection. But, we put on this online event, with music and book readings and poetry readings and special messages, like Angela came on and talked about it. And so we have a page linked from the episode notes where you can go and see that online event. And it also has a huge list of nonprofits and even using things like charitynavigator.org to look at, okay, are these nonprofits good? Do they do what they say? All of that. So all those links are there, and that's for humans and for animals. So that link is in the episode notes, and everyone we talk about today, those links are in the episode notes. We definitely want to touch on the Humane Society, the United States Humane Society, obviously the biggest organization, but they have offices throughout the Southeast and throughout the country. And you can go to humanesociety.org. They actually have an emergency relief fund just for this. And they have workers that come out. I mean, there's all kinds of shelters across the country that are affiliated, and they even have volunteers going out into the Southeast of all the places that have been damaged from the hurricanes. And so there's places like Fur Kids in Atlanta, Georgia. You can go to furkids.org. They took their shelter supplies, went out in the field, helped rescue animals, helped with medicine, helped with food. There's Best Friends, which is one of our very first no-kill shelters in the country. They also supplied volunteers and food and medical supplies, and you can go to bestfriends.org. So a lot of shelters are taking in all these extra animals that are being rescued, right? And from that, we talk about the fact that when these animals are being rescued in, and if we, as the humans in the planet here, look up our local shelters, chances are some of these animals are actually from the Southeast being, moved out into different shelters across the country. So there's a link from Best, if you go to bestfriends.org, and I'm going to put that link in the show notes too, that you can go directly and look up your local shelter and where you can adopt. Because when you adopt an animal from a rescue, you're saving that animal's life, and you're also making room for another animal to get into the shelter and be rescued. So you're saving 2 lives whenever you do this. So far more important than buying an animal, is adopting them. Right, Angela?
Oh, absolutely. And I think what everybody if you don't know, if you're not aware, and there's no reason why you should be, but it's well known with those of us who are really involved in animal welfare and animal well-being, is shelters are in crisis even before Helene and Milton. I mean, the shelters are overcrowded as a result of many animals that were taken into homes over COVID. And then when people started to go back to normal lives, they found that for one reason or another, and then there are those reasons that, that are affecting everybody, like the cost of living, extra, et cetera, et cetera. And shelters are in crisis and overwhelmed with the number of animals they have. So with these 2 disasters that are really catastrophic, it's putting so much burden on them. But you're right, Lisa, like Best Friends, they network across the country. And Trusted House Sitters, we're partnered with nonprofits and shelters. And one of the shelters that we work with really year round of events and helping them support their animals and community is the Helen Woodward Animal Rescue Center in San Diego. But they don't just work in their local community. They actually, have animals sent to them from all over the country. And I know as a result of Helene and as a result of Milton, they're getting puppies being sent to them from shelters and rescue organizations in the area because, as we know, puppies get adopted so much easier than older dogs. But don't ever pass over, those other, there's other dogs and cats and et cetera, et cetera. It's not always. You can really, you can have a lot in your life and give yourselves a lot if you actually look at more senior pets. But we can talk about that. But really today we're talking about helping shelters out. And it's not just donating money. You can actually help in so many other ways. But you know what? Even $1 will help. Even $1 will help. And don't ever think that it's too small what you're giving. Nothing is too small. Everything is needed.
Absolutely. And when you say also volunteering, sometimes you could just go to the shelter and hang out with the animals to give them some love and attention. That's what they really crave. And it helps them get to the next home and feel loved because it's traumatic for them. I mean, through Trusted House Sitters, Nancy and I pet sit across the country as part of our digital nomad adventures where we document parks and public lands. And, when we pet sit, this is our thing. It's, our way to work, obviously, but it's, we have downtime and we spend a lot of time just pet sitting, honestly, because we love it. But there's a lot of animals that we take care of that are rescues, and they're going through something to just like us humans. If we've got something that has been traumatic to us, there is PTSD from it. There are emotional reactions and things that you just having that compassion and letting the animal go through the process, just like us humans do. That's what we are, for a lot of these animals. And so being a volunteer and going to a shelter and just to provide love, sometimes shelters need people to just donate time to walk the dogs. There's a park in Tucson We don't like the name. It's Christopher Columbus. But anyway, so we don't like the park name, but it's a beautiful park with a pond and herons that roost and a wonderful trail. Even the Juan Bautista de Anza National Historic Trail runs through it. A wonderful biking route, but it's right behind the local shelter. And throughout there, you just see volunteers. Whenever we go to the park, we just see all these volunteers walking dogs around in the park. It's wonderful to see. And those dogs get to have that human bonding, which helps them when they get to a forever home, have that connection, because they can lose that. And if they don't have that compassion, then they don't trust humans that much. So I think that volunteer part, I mean, you can even foster. I know we pet sit for a lot of people that foster animals all the time. So sometimes we go to pet sit and we're like, okay, who you got today? So the fostering is even something you can do. And I know that Helen Woodward, you talk about them a lot in San Diego. They're an amazing, amazing organization. So they have those kind of programs too, right?
Yes, they do. Yeah, they do. I mean, I also volunteer with an organization in the UK called the Blue Cross. They are an animal charity. And they also have a pet bereavement helpline. It's for those pet parents who lose a pet family member and need help and support. And I volunteer, and so many, bereaved pet parents say, they're not ready to have another animal, or they don't want. And you know what? It's different for everybody. Whatever way that you deal with your grief is your way. It's your personal way. And nobody is to tell you rightly or wrongly. But the one thing that so many are not aware of, and when I speak to them, finding ways to help them get over, not get over, but live with their grief or bring back joy without. They don't realize that actually you can go to a shelter and just sit in the cattery and have cats walking around you if you're a cat person. And then there are other shelters where you can actually go and sit in with the dogs, and they have children go into the shelters and read to the dogs, and that helps them with their reading skills. And it helps the animals. It helps them socialize. It helps them get used to. But there are so many people, there's so many that really don't realize that you can do that. But also there are other ways, if you're in a position where you can give something, like towels or bedding or things like that, make sure that the shelter can take them. First of all, you only have to, if you've got access to a phone, if you're in somewhere where you've got communication, just ask them or call them and say, and very often there is a recording on their phone line saying, if you want to donate, and that's not just money, that's whatever, take it to there. So there are so many ways to actually help. And I think, and as you say, fostering, that is so important, because so many of these shelters physically do not have the room. And the only way they can help with any rescue animals is to place them somewhere. And you know what? When you foster, it doesn't cost you anything, because the shelter meets all the expenses. They meet any veterinary expenses, any food bills. They provide everything for you. So it's not like you've got to, outlay. I have a dear, dear friend, and she is the staff travel writer on the Washington Post. She is such a pet mom or, animal lover. In the last 2 years, she has fostered 40 dogs. And she's got one today. She's got one this weekend that's going to its forever home. She works full time. She travels a lot, but she just says that's her way of giving back. And she has these puppies, and she fosters kittens as well. But 40 dogs, because of her, are now in their forever homes. And she just says the joy she's got from that. And yes, and just think, you can be like a grandparent or a favorite aunt or somebody. You can bring them in, bring them up, and then turn them over to their new families, and then, go on to the next one. But there is something really, really, really rewarding, but it's also something that's desperately needed by shelters.
Yeah, I think the fostering is fantastic. I've seen that with people do just cats, and they have like, you go in their house and one room that would be normally a guest room is like, here's the weights, here's, because they're weighing the animals, they're doing that. And I think it's wonderful to do. But it is that human connection thing that is so important. I do want to go to you on this because, you find this is a sad, sad thing because these fur babies are family. And as pet sitters, we see this, we always send updates to who we're pet sitting for. And they're like, you can tell they're missing their babies. Sometimes we do Zoom calls so they can talk to them, so we do videos and things, animal FaceTime, but, it's family, right? And so during these disasters, not only are we losing human lives, we've lost animal lives.
Yeah.
And also families are being split apart because of an animal ending up maybe, people on roofs. I mean, if you look at what happened in these hurricanes, dams breaking open. I think it was 5 dams in Tennessee, people being rescued at the top of hospital buildings. It has been so traumatic. And the amount of tornadoes that happened during Milton, during, it is insane what people went through, and you can't be prepared. And an animal's going to do whatever it needs to do for safety. And so do humans, right? And and now we're seeing here's so many animals that need homes, but it came from good homes. And these families are split up, and you may never know what happened to their animals. And we do hear these stories where animals end up walking home across the country and stuff. It's actually happened to our dear friend Ronnie. That happened where the cat, she moved across the city and the cat found her. He got lost during everything was happening. The move snuck out and she couldn't get her cat and she had to go. Once you have to leave, you have to leave. And it was like 5 years later, he found where she lived. And we're talking across the city of Tucson, right? Is that not amazing? He didn't know where her new place was. That is insanely cool. But so I wonder if that's going to happen after this. But just because I know that you are certified as a counselor for this, for the bereavement side of this, any words of comfort for those who have lost their animal lover, their family? I think it's going to be very difficult because they won't know if they're alive or not. And so any words for that? And then also words for how do we as supportive friends and family support our friends that may have gone through that kind of loss?
I think to answer your first question is it's grief. It's a bereavement and it's grief, and grief is grief no matter what it's for. And the other thing is not knowing. That is the one thing. And those that this has happened to will be having so many emotions. And one of the strongest emotions that we know is guilt. And the guilt that they didn't do enough and they could have done more. And if only, and you go through that scenario about if only, if only, if only. It's nobody's fault. It is a tragic, tragic accident. And yes, we can say that you can put in all of these things in place if a disaster is coming. But you know what? There are some things that are just physically, emotionally, and every way out of our control. They happen. So how can you deal with that? Know that, you gave them the best life that they ever could have while they were there. They will never leave you because they're in your hearts forever. And the one thing you can do is, one thing, not post, but pre, always, always, always make sure your pets are microchipped. Always. I mean, because there is a miraculous thing that can happen that they will be found. And if they've got a microchip in, they will get home because they've got that. But, it's one of those things that it's a process that you go through and it's something that you learn to deal with. But when we know that's happened to somebody, how can we support them? One of the biggest things we can allow them and invite them to do is talk about their pets. So many people think that, it's happened. Oh, get over it. You'll get another one. You'll do this. It's not that way at all. Some people grieve for years. Others get, sort of the way they deal with it is they go out and get a new pet almost immediately. And that's their way of helping and dealing. But if we are surrounded and we've got those friends and we've got those family, don't shut them down. Don't absolutely invite them to talk about their pet family member, because they exist. They existed. They are still there. And being able to talk and being able to share your grief is one way of getting comfort and one way of being able to manage it. If you imagine all of those emotions shut in and not being able to talk about them, but also, if you see somebody's grieving and you know them that well, bring in gently a suggestion that, if they're not being they're not being what's the word I want when you don't support somebody?
You're not
being loyal to your pet that is not there anymore or any longer. But if you feel, pet companionship and pet presence can help you heal. And if you are going through that and you feel able to, and even if you don't, just think about being able to go and spend some time with those animals in a shelter. It can actually bring comfort, and it can bring you a feeling that you're absolutely doing something. And just bear in mind too that that pet family member that is no longer with you would not want you to be in grief and guilt, and because they will know that whatever happened, it was nobody's fault. It was a tragic accident. But the other thing I would say too is there are organizations that you can go to that you can find support, because nobody these days has to go through any of this on their own. And that's the one thing, having that support. And you know what? I do this work, and one of the reasons that I do it so well is because I've been through this. I know what it's like to have lost a pet family member. I lost my Holly 17 years ago. I still cry for her. I still think about her. I still talk to her. She was my heart dog, and she was there, and she will never, ever leave. But I also smile and laugh and have joy at those memories that I had with her. And that will come back to you. You will get through the grief. And if you think about the worst situation you've ever been in your life and you got through it, this one probably seems the worst, and probably seems, that you won't. I've had those callers that I've been talking to say to me that the loss of their pet family member has been the hardest loss they've ever experienced. It's harder than any human loss, not because they loved any less, but because our animals are with us 24/7. They're not like our human family members who go off to work, who move away, who go, and you aren't with them all the time. And they're there. Our pets are with us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. When they're not there, our lives change 110% in a heartbeat. The reason we had for getting up in the morning, the reason we had to stop because we had to take them for a walk, or we had to clean their litter tray, or we had to go outside and give them hay, we had to do all of that. That is our purpose. That's our reason, because they rely on us so much. And when they're not there, what do we do with that time? What do we do with that love? What do we do with our hearts? We have to somehow work through and help others and allow that to help us grieve.
And, our friends recently lost one of their dogs. And so the other dog, which was more puppy, went in, aged almost overnight and became an elder and was just depressed. The cat was depressed. So they went out and got another dog. And they said they didn't even think they were ready for it. They were grieving, and they still grieve. And so they got a little puppy, and the puppy, the dog that was the original puppy, giving some privacy for them, became like the big brother suddenly and had to take on new roles. It was amazing. And they did it not just for themselves, because the other dog had depression and so did the cat. They were missing their family, their loved one. And, they don't always see exactly what's going on, right? But they know suddenly, they know that happened, and that the other dog was sick and they were depressed. So they went and got another one. So that's also something to think about. If your family got split up during these disasters, and you've got to take extra care of the animals that you may still have, you know what I mean? Because they're going to feel the loss just as much. And so sometimes getting that extra attention, that love, obviously everyone's, emotional. I want to touch on the emotions because grief does go in different ways, and it can go to anger, very easily. It's just part of it. You just go through these cycles of emotion, and so the animals too. And so the more love you can give, more cuddles, I say give everyone extra treats. Maybe not.
And through these disasters, the loss is compounded. The loss of your pet family member, if that's what's happened. But even if it hasn't, even if you are still all together, there are other losses. It could be loss of your home. There could be loss of whatever is in your home. And I know, we can sit and say, it's just material things. We're okay. That's the most important thing. Absolutely it is. But you know what? It's not just material things in a way, because you are connected to them. They are part of you. There is something that you've spent years building. Those losses, are huge. And when we talk about pet loss, and we talk about not having, how do we deal with that? And, I won't get another one because you're not replacing anything. What you are doing is opening up your heart. There's this, a well-known saying, and I absolutely think it's perfect. And that is, when we look to adopt or we look to foster, there's this saying that says, saving the life of one animal won't change the world, but the world will certainly change for that one animal. And that's what we do. It's like, if we then find purpose and we find giving, but yes, loss brings out so many different emotions. As you say, Lisa, anger, guilt, sorrow, crying, it's so many of them. But the one thing that you should not have to do is go through that alone. Even if you are alone and you have nobody around you, there is support out there, and there's ways that you can help yourself, and ways that others can help you too.
I love this. I love that we're having this conversation because it's very real about what's going on. It's
not talked about enough.
And honestly, we're at the beginning of the recovery, so yeah, I was just thinking when you were saying about animals having those chips, I mean, it's very possible you may end up with your dog or your cat home again, and we haven't even talked about what's happened with livestock and farm animals and horses. Oh boy, that's a whole other show, but also the Humane Society and shelters do work with that. And like you were saying, they're so connected. Like I'm looking at, in Florida, oh my gosh, Southern Florida turned out and just went in and adopted all these animals from the shelter. And I'm talking about the pound, when you call animal control, not just, the Humane Society, these people just turned up and started rescuing and adopting and doing. And so, it's really wonderful to see these movements of people doing it. I know Trusted House Sitters immediately, you guys worked with the Humane Society and donated to their emergency animal relief fund. So everyone, again, those links, there's humanesociety.org, bestfriends.org, and that link is going to really help you get into all the different shelters according to where you are based, whether you want to volunteer or donate, and really each shelter, from what I've seen, has a wish list and what they need and how you can help, what they need volunteers. You go right on their website. They all have now got pages for Hurricane Helene. So we're going to do our best on this show as we go to keep in touch with the different shelters and bring them on shows so we can follow up with them and see what they need. Because like Angela was saying, these shelters are, they're not rich. Okay. They're not, they always need food, supplies, volunteers. They always are in need. And when this kind of thing happens, now they're really more in need. So we want to help them. So as much as we can all do, the better. Also, again, furkids.org out of Atlanta area have been doing an amazing thing. But in closing, it is Adopt a Shelter Dog Month. So the first shelter isn't it Philadelphia that's what we're celebrating as part of Adopt a Shelter Dog is the first shelter.
The first shelter was actually in 1800, and It was in Philadelphia, and it was opened by Carolyn Earl White, and her dedication was to helping animals, and that inspired the American Humane Society. And the American Humane Society first celebrated Adopt a Shelter Dog Month in October in 1981. It's been going that long. But yeah, I mean, it takes one person who to start a movement that actually since the 1800s has now built in. And goodness me, if there were no shelters and no rescue organizations, I don't know what would happen.
Yeah, I think, they're really great to help too. I mean, Nancy and I worked in Mexico rescuing dogs and took them all in and cleaned them up and worked with a vet. We found a bunch of dogs, little puppies in a dump, living on water and tires and just walking through rubble and broken glass. And so we're like, hey, we were just driving by. And so next, they're all in the car. We take them to the vet and he worked with us. We cleaned them. We trained them. We got them so that all their shots were done. They would sit, and we knew that they needed to be trained to be adoptable. And then we took them over the border to the Humane Society and they got homes in America. So, I think it's a cool story because you can do that. And there's so many organizations, that really work with people to do that. If you see something, you can do something. And also for those in between careers, if you're looking for a job and things like that, sometimes volunteering is really good for your resume. So I'm just saying this could be a good opportunity.
And you know what, the numbers as well. Do you know at any one time there are 3 to 4 million pets in shelters around the US alone? That's dogs and cats. There are all other animals that need rescuing as well. But I just want to, I know we're closing up, but the one thing that I wanted to say is, puppies, they stand a really good chance of getting adopted. Everybody seems to want a puppy. Just think if you're looking to open up your heart and your home to another dog or another cat or another pet, consider a senior, because so many of them, for one reason or another, find themselves in a shelter, at 12, at 10, at 14 years old. And they've probably been in a loving home their entire lives, but for one reason or another, and who's to say why, they suddenly find themselves in a shelter, in somewhere that's got strange smells, strange noises. It's not like their home. They've got nothing familiar, no familiar voices or anything else. And at that age, just imagine, multiply it by 7. And that's 98 for a 14-year-old. And imagine somebody who's 98 years old having to go into a home after they've been in their home all their lives. And am I tweaking emotions? Absolutely I am, because that's the first thing that starts you thinking about it. You don't ever go through with it based on emotion alone. You take an animal into your home based on so many other things. Is it right? Is it right for them? Is it right for you? Can you afford it? Can you do all of those things? But just think about those senior pets that perhaps their pet parent has passed away. Perhaps they've had to go into a home, a nursing home that they don't allow animals, and the family haven't been able to take it in. And this loving animal, has been used to that all their lives, and suddenly they don't have that. And the shelters I know do their very, very best for all of the animals, but I know a couple of shelters that go the extra mile for those seniors, because they say they come in and they are just lost, totally lost. They have no idea where, why, and how. And that when they actually find somebody who is willing to give them a second chance to live out their lives in the best possible way, they said the transformation in them is just amazing. So, yeah, just think about the elderly ones.
Yeah, in fact, we sit for a couple who that's all they do is they bring in elder animals. That's what they
Yeah.
do. And they just say, no, we bring them in. It's, you know, because somebody needs to do it. And I really love that because, you know, sometimes these animals, they're going through grief because maybe their parent passed,
Yeah.
you know. Humans get elder, they pass on, and then what happens to the animal? And maybe the family's like, we're not animal people or whatever, busy, can't have animals in their apartment, you name it. And that's the thing too. If you live in a place where you can't have pets and your lifestyle isn't good for it, that's when you can volunteer once a month or whatever you can do, or donate, right? So there's a lot we can do. And going to that part of animals, they say your dog's your best friend, man's best friend. During Hurricane Helene, this little boy and his sister were at the grandparents' house in the mountains of West North Carolina, and a mudslide took the house. And she was like $5,000 or something like that away from paying off the mortgage. Can you believe it?
Oh, no.
And it took the whole house out. And they're running around, and neighbors are trying to find him, and saw the little girl, but the little boy they couldn't find. Well, his dog, he was under a pile of rubble of the house, and he was trapped. And it's still pouring rain, and he's feeling, where he is starting to flood, and he can feel water on himself. And his dog knew where he was, sat at the pile and barked and whined and barked and whined. And everybody was like, what is it? They didn't realize the dog was trying to cause attention. They rescued the little boy. I don't know if he's out now, but he's in hospital because the trauma was so great, because he's little. He's like 11.
Wow.
But that dog, his dog saved his life. Is that not an amazing story? I mean, we're going to hear a lot of those kinds of things during the hurricane, and so many people are doing so good. So it's really a nice thing to see community get together. And unfortunately, it's during a disaster. I wish we did it a little bit more, but really communities are getting together and helping each other. Businesses are helping each other. Like in Asheville, the breweries are helping each other, not competing, helping, which I think is incredible. So many things. Restaurants are serving free breakfast. Just doing free breakfast for the locals, because they know it's hard to get food or running water. Those with running water and electricity are helping. And that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And you've got to think, shelters have been impacted too, their buildings, one shelter in Asheville had to evacuate and went to the other shelter in Asheville, and they helped them and actually flew pets out of the area. So the stories of the volunteers and the first responders, the emergency relief workers, all the volunteers, the people who are paid to do this too, because it's traumatic, have done such an amazing job. And I know it's going to keep going. And because the whole area has gone through so much, like just even having to replace an entire water infrastructure for a city, that's huge to do. Yeah. You're going to have clean new pipes, so that's a really good thing. You don't want lead in your pipes, so this is good. So there's a silver lining, right? But you can never really say it's really a blessing in disguise because so many deaths have happened and so much devastation of business. And so we can't. But there's always something positive somewhere in the rubble, right? And I think the positivity is the human forces that have come together as communities to really absolutely do everything they possibly can. And that's including Milton. That's really at the beginning stages of cleanup. And so our hearts are out there for everyone affected and the families on the outside. There's still people, searching for people. It's still just very raw on everyone's nerves. And as we record this today, there's still people without power. There's still people without water. So understand, this is some bare necessities. When we wake up in the morning and complain that, oh, maybe the hot water heater is not working today and get upset about it, maybe we should just realize that we have friends out there, fellow people in our country that have not had water for weeks now. So, and it's going to happen for a longer time. And let's also look at the businesses. I know this is a pet show, but there's pet businesses too, vets offices and things that have been affected. Pet shops where you go get your toys and the catnip to keep your cats happy. All of that has been affected. And so I encourage those this year, look at what you're doing in gift giving and perhaps give a gift of gift certificates. Buy online if you can. If you're looking at the tourism sector, move your dates to a different date in the future instead of canceling. Maybe buy gift certificates, whatever you can. Try and keep these small businesses afloat with what you can that you were already planning to do, right? So it's not like asking for money out of your pocket. Maybe look at what we can do as travelers too. I know a lot of us, we're with, trusted house sitters as, connecting people who care about animals and travel. And us as travelers, we need to really have a light foot in what we do, have patience because people are scrambling, just like when COVID, when, businesses started to open and not all the employees could be there. It's the same thing. Understand the emotions of everything that everyone's going through. There's desperation because of lack of funding. That is for the individuals too. There's so many businesses, when Nancy and I went through this with the wildfires in California, it was a year and a half, 7 evacuations. We don't have a brick and mortar store, but I will tell you it affected our business, but we're one of those silent things, that you don't get counted really with what our kind of business is. So there's a lot of businesses like that out there. So I would talk to who you can and just kind of think about each person that or you're communicating with in the Southeast, because the ripple effect is large. It is not just staying in the Southeast, that ripple, right? It affects the rest of the country and it affects the world. So think about that and who you're talking to, who you're communicating with, and understand emotions are high and they're turbulent.
Absolutely.
So patience, kindness goes a long way. And whatever you can do, sometimes it's just lending an ear. Honestly, that's something you can do. Like Angela says, lend an ear. You can spare time to have that conversation with someone that just needs to get it out. And they may need to get it out the next day and the next day and the next day.
And just let them know that you're there, and just let them know, don't be that person who says, oh, we need to have lunch. No. Say, we need to help you. And I am here. And no matter what time of the day or night it is, you can call me or you can text me, or if you've got that ability. But just be there for one another. And the other thing too, kindness, absolutely. But huge dose of empathy goes a long way. I'm not talking sympathy. I'm talking empathy. Imagine what it would be like if you were in their place. Look around where you are, your home, your pets, your family, everything, and just imagine, I look and I go, oh my goodness, I can't imagine. I spill a cup of water and I know what that does on the floor. Can you imagine if you have your whole home just, I can't. So that empathy, that I'm okay, but I could well be that person that it affects tomorrow. So just be the person that that you would like others, the way you would like to be treated. Treat them.
That's right. And there's a lot of people I know going through survivor's guilt too. That thought, I know personally, I know friends who are right on the pathway, and then they were safe, and then they were like, oh, and then they went, oh my God, now look what happened. Right. So, that is a normal reaction and feeling. And, the only thing I always say is, I use that quote from Joan Baez over and over. Action is the antidote to despair. You feel upset about it, relieved and glad you're fine, but now you see the other devastation that could have been you. One thing you can do is do something to help. And then that feeling will dissipate when you do something to help. So I just want to close with that. And thank you all for listening to Big Blend Radio's Pet Connection show here with Angela Laws. I'm Trusted House Sitters. Check them out at trustedhousesitters.com. Great organization. And I want to give a shout out to all of our pet families that we take care of and pet sit with throughout the Southeast, because I know how you're feeling, and I know a lot of you aren't home and won't be home for the next few months. And so I know that I'm in contact with you a lot, but Nancy and I love and care about all of you. And I know, Angela, Trusted House Sitters has been amazing trying to connect with everyone, which is really difficult to do because some people, again, have no electricity, Wi-Fi, cell signals, all of that. So, but that doesn't mean don't, be there for it. Eventually people do get everything, get online somewhere. But also understand if you don't get a hold of someone and you're really worried, that sometimes they just really don't have a signal, and you think the signal's there, then it goes away. So, it's a difficult time, but, thanks so much.
And stay safe, everybody. And if there's any members out there that are looking for any support, then Trusted Houses' membership services team are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And all I can say is stay safe, stay well, love each other, care for each other, and we'll talk to you next time. Thanks, Lisa. You and Nancy stay safe too.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us here on Big Blend Radio's Pet Connection podcast. New episodes air every third Wednesday. Keep up with us at bigblendradio.com and learn more about the world of pet sitting at trustedhousesitters.com.